You guys are probably familiar with the horrific and devastating floods that just swept past Beijing and a lot of northeast China. It was really bad and millions of people were affected. But the thing is, China didn't want too many people talking about it because of something called the Mandate of Heaven. The Mandate of Heaven is the idea that China's emperor, or the current dynasty, needs to be replaced when the leadership becomes ineffective, or people start suffering, and usually it's marked by things like floods. You get the picture now? A totalitarian government would be really worried if a flood ripped through and started affecting millions of people because it might make them question the leadership. Well, this was the worst flood in 140 years in China, and even though China is an authoritarian dictatorship run by the Communist Party of China, nothing has changed. China is still a dynasty, albeit with the name and appearance of a knockoff Soviet Union. So you understand that in a country that censors everything to maintain the power of its people, they wouldn't want too many people talking about this flood. I mean, they literally sent rescue workers out not to rescue people, but to hang up metal boards to physically censor damage from the floods so that people couldn't see the damage to infrastructure and talk about it online. I kid you not, they went out and hammered metal boards so people couldn't look at a collapsed bridge. I mean, would it even surprise you though? We're talking about the country that has gotten caught so many times with fake drainage grates. When you're building a city, you're probably gonna want your storm drains to be able to actually drain the water to prevent, flooding. But no, we're looking at China. We're talking about the country that has faked fire hydrants, faked safety equipment, and now is faking drainage. Of course it's gonna flood. After the floods, they needed more propaganda from the Communist Party-led rescue efforts, so they literally had to make it up. It didn't come out the way they wanted, so they faked the footage after the floods went through because they needed more ammo to show the rest of the world how powerful and amazing the rescue efforts were. Thankfully, the citizens of China aren't so stupid, as some people snuck around the barriers to film these fake efforts. And this is something we saw over and over again. We saw this in the fake COVID relief efforts. We saw this in multitudes of propaganda across China. They make it up. When it's not good enough, they have to fake it. Look here, they even sprayed a hose to make it look like there was still a torrential downpour. You can't make this up. Well, in China's case, you have to make it up. In this clip, a disappointed Chinese man films the fake digging effort of the Communist Party's relief team digging a pre-made mound of dirt to look for survivors. I kid you not, the priority of the Chinese government was to censor the entire thing. And when they felt the narrative was slipping out of their grasp, they even staged fake rescue efforts so that they could control how it looked. They got teams of soldiers to march up and down streets to do nothing but pose for cameras. But in reality, what the Chinese government was doing was even more sinister than that. In an effort to save the capital of Beijing, and all the government officials inside of it, flood water was diverted away from Beijing to nearby poor areas. One of the worst that was forcibly flooded by the leadership in Beijing was a town called Zhuozhou. Residents built dikes to keep the flood waters out, and Beijing actually sent demolition teams to release the dikes so that the floods in the wealthy Communist Party headquarters of Beijing didn't have to suffer. This led the areas of this town to completely go underwater. There were literally areas that were so far underwater that it would drown any human being trying to stand in it. The police and demolition teams from Beijing went past villagers who were trying to stop them because they didn't want to be more flooded than they already were. Meanwhile, all of the CCP officials are not suffering flood damage because they literally had people go divert the waters away from them. And at the same time, just to be safe, they all headed to the coast to get away from the threats of the flood, to enjoy a beautiful beach paradise life while the rest of the peasants are drowning underwater. But Beijing knows that no one will care about peasants, and they're easier to suppress. People took to the streets and tried to fight off the police officers, but with very little success because China has the most totalitarian state apparatus in the world. But even though the Chinese government's priority is propaganda to, try to make the rescue efforts on behalf of the Chinese government look like a massive success, they do make a lot of mistakes because, of course, there's going to be people that are filming the truth. They're going to be filming what's happening. They're going to be filming the fact that they're spraying a hose to make it look like it's raining. They're going to be, in the area going, what the hell? What is my government doing? Why are they faking this? But at the same time, they also screw up because they keep using the same material year after year. For example, this rescue worker that's so tired that he fell asleep while he was eating lunch is a very touching tale. But they use this story 3 times in a row. And I'm not talking about 3 times in a row for this flood. I'm talking about 3 times in a row, year after year. They keep using this same clip, pretending like it's part of this new disaster. No, it was from a prior disaster. Wait, it was actually from a prior disaster to that. But they keep screwing up, and they keep getting caught. And for some reason, there's no accountability, and no one seems to care. Another unintended problem with this flood is that after the water retreats, everything that has been destroyed, like crops and animals, rot and spread bacteria and disease. In fact, some people are reporting that hospitals are absolutely out of control with antibiotic use right now because people are dying of insane infections due to all the floodwaters. When you have this much stuff damaging real livestock, live living animals and beings, and letting that stuff flow through water where people cannot escape it, you're gonna be dealing with a serious infection problem, with many people realizing that this is going to be a very, very long-term problem. It's kind of like Chairman Mao said, China has a population of 600 million, and even if half of them were killed, then there are still 300 million people left. The Chinese government has never cared for the people. They simply are scared of losing control over them. The Communist Party of China prioritized the rich and the party connected. If peasants die or they get washed away, well, it was necessary to save the leadership of inconvenience. Here's a quote. The second flood peak is hitting Zhuozhou now, and the water is nearly up to the traffic lights at its deepest point. They should really just come out and say why they want to protect Beijing at all costs. And that was from a villager named Sun. No, the people aren't stupid. They know what's happening. The trust in the government is fraying, but nothing will happen when most people simply don't know what's going on. When I sampled a portion of Chinese people in other areas, many had a very vague idea, not about the devastation in the outlying areas of Beijing, but even just like a very vague idea of the flood in general. They didn't really know about it other than that they couldn't go to Beijing because they were getting some rain. When a government censors and controls the narrative on such a level that people don't even know about the weather, hell, when a government physically censors collapsed bridges, how the hell are we supposed to trust anything they say? Government self-preservation is the only thing that the CCP cares about. But this gets deeper. When I was searching the name of the most affected area, Zhuozhou, on Twitter, or X as you might know it, it was clear how the Chinese government was using this Western platform to try and cover up this devastation. The Chinese government created thousands of accounts selling prostitution and pornography to completely pollute the feed when you search for this town in Chinese. Go ahead, type Zhuozhou in Chinese on your Twitter, and you will be bombarded with illegal ads for these services. Both prostitution and pornography are banned in China. And by the way, if China can weaponize this platform like this, why isn't the Twitter staff or X staff doing anything about this? They could shut down these bot accounts in 2 seconds and allow people to communicate about this disaster. But no, they do nothing. China is willing to weaponize something that it outlaws to hide a story that could bring awareness to a human catastrophe that could save lives. China is running an influence campaign to hide the weather. Something isn't right. Of course, there were some people that wanted to help out. Some donation centers were set up to help the victims of the flooded areas. But guess what? There's rumors coming out of the affected areas that now people are saying that the local government officials in the Chinese government, the CCP, are taking the donations for themselves. And this would not be the first time that this has happened. In fact, pretty much any tragedy that's ever hit China has seen charitable corruption coming straight from the CCP itself. Have a look at the sheer devastation that is wrecking northern China. Look at the scope. Look at the depth. Look at this absolute nightmare. The Chinese government has some official figures that they'd like you to believe. 33 people died. I'll leave you with that.
但是一些这个地方都要出现一些弯曲的东西，像人到这个感觉是比较。